invitations are something that I've always enjoyed getting. I remember a few months back, people started giving me invitations to graduation parties and coming to graduation and stuff like that. Anton came up to me in the sound booth one day and handed me an invitation to come to a luau-style party that they had, and that was awesome. I don't regret going to that at all. It was great. If you've never been to a actual Samoan people party, you are missing out, man. They know how to throw down. It was fun. But I love invitations. And this morning we're going to talk about invitations. And I wanted to start out today by telling you how I met my wife. You're going to probably wondering how this ties in with invitations. But I've given brief little synopsis kind of how I met my wife before. But I want to go into a little bit more detail this morning. So I met my wife in 2010. So we just celebrated our 6-year anniversary as far as when we first started dating, coming up on my 3-year wedding anniversary here in about a week and a half. And you guys need to pray for her. She's got blessings stored up for her in heaven for being married to me and putting up with me. But in 2010, I had just, before I met my wife, I had dated a girl for just a very short period of time. Before that, I had this thing going on where everybody always wanted to set me up with somebody. And how many of y'all have somebody that they always wanted to set you up with somebody? They wanted to be matchmaker. Anybody ever have something like that in their life? And you want to just say, stop, leave me alone. I can handle this. So I had a friend. She was a girl. She wanted me to meet this girl. So we started talking a little bit. She lived in another state. And so my friend and one of my other friends invited me. They said, hey, you should go actually meet her. So I was like, man, I've been talking to this girl. She seems nice and everything. I'm going to go meet her. What if she's weird? She was. She's very weird. You know how you meet somebody? She was a really nice girl. She wasn't weird. We didn't click. You know how, it just don't work? We did not mesh well. So early 2010, that was 2009, early 2010, there was a mutual friend of mine and Stephanie's, that she kept telling me, she's like, I really want you to meet my friend Stephanie. I think you'd really like her. And I'm thinking, no. Like, I'm not doing that. I've been down this road. Just let it be. She kept on. And apparently she was doing the same thing to Stephanie, telling her, I want you to meet this guy named Micah. So anyway, eventually, just to kind of, I don't remember who did it. I'm going to say that she did it and she pursued me. But she decided that I'm just going to send him a Facebook request, and maybe this person will see that we're friends on Facebook, and she'll leave us alone. So she sent me a request on Facebook is what I'm going with. And so I accepted it. We didn't really say anything to each other. So a couple months go by, and it's real late one night, and this was back in 2010 before everybody had Facebook on their cell phones. So if you looked on Facebook Messenger and it said somebody was online, it meant they were actually in front of a computer. You know what I'm talking about? So it was probably 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, and I was sitting on my computer, and I saw it said Stephanie Wilkes is online, and I was like, she was the only person. I was like, I'm going to say hey to this girl. So I said hey to this girl, and then I married that girl. So, but basically what happened was we started talking. We started getting to know each other. We had mutual friends through a denomination of church that my dad pastored for a long time. Coming to find out, we had went to church camp and stuff together growing up, but we never crossed paths. We were in the same place all the time, but we never crossed paths. And so I knew that she was going to be working at this summer camp. She worked and volunteered there every year. And then, out of the blue, the guy that's in charge of that summer camp called me and asked me to volunteer there. I want you to come. And I was thinking, I haven't met Stephanie yet in person. What if she's weird? I'd already been down this road one time. He extended me an invitation to come, and I was a little reluctant. I was a little worried about it. I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody without meeting them before. That's kind of a thing now. But I was real nervous about it. So I accepted his invitation to come work at the summer camp, and we fell in love, and it was just great. And she wasn't weird. She was a little bit crazy. But I think most all women are crazy a little bit. If they ain't got a little bit of crazy in them, they ain't very good at all. So you got to have a little bit of crazy. But if you think about it, at every major intersection and every major decision of your life, there was some form of an invitation that was given. Some form of an invitation. And if you really wanted to get freaked out, maybe grossed out a little bit, you're here on this earth because of some form of an invitation. Some form of an invitation, whether that was a godly invitation or not, you are here because of some form of an invitation. Now, the thing about an invitation is an invitation can change everything. It can change everything. You have the power, everybody in this room has the power to change the trajectory of somebody's life with an invitation, just a simple invitation, one invitation. I grew up in a traditional church background up until I was about 18 years old. And there's nothing wrong with traditional church. I grew up in it, still has a place in my heart. But when I was a kid, when I was a late children's church age to youth group age, they were always wanting us to invite people to church. Invite your friends to church. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't want to invite my friends to that church and all those kind of churches. Because if you really think about it, most of the time, for somebody that's never been to church, traditional church is weird. It's very weird. You've never really thought about it. If you were a church person growing up, you were just used to it. But for somebody that doesn't know anything about church, it's very strange. And I remember there'd be many times that, actually, let's not lie. There weren't many times that I invited people to church, but there were some times that I would. And I was always nervous. I was like, they're going to come in here. I know they don't go to church. They're not a church person. They're going to come and they're going to sit down, and somebody's going to get to shouting. Somebody's going to get to speaking in tongues, running the aisles, and I ain't never going to see them again. They're going to avoid me at school. They're going to say that I go to some weird church. All that, you know what? Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay? That was my fear of inviting people to church, because it was, honestly, it was a little bit weird. Those churches and churches all over the place like that were perfectly designed for the results they were getting, and that's good. There is a place for that kind of church. And there's plenty of traditional churches in our town that are reaching hundreds and even thousands of people, and that's great. But whenever CrossPointe Church started, it was my senior year of high school. CrossPointe Church was launched, and we wanted to be a different kind of church. And what we really wanted to do was we wanted to create an environment for people that was irresistible. And it was something that people just wanted to attend. And the thing is that we struggled a little bit. That would be an understatement when we first started, because it's basically like this. We started this church wanting to reach unchurched people, but we were church people and didn't know how to reach unchurched people. That's the summary of about our first 7 years. We struggled. It's kind of interesting. I think about it sometimes. Sometimes I'll go through Facebook and look through old pictures of how far CrossPointe's come. Just a quick poll. If you were here from the beginning of CrossPointe, raise your hand. Okay. Now, that's good. There ain't a whole lot. We started out the first Sunday with about 130, 150 in that range. And what I saw and what I noticed throughout the course and different eras of CrossPointe Church ministry is we would have waves of people come whenever we try something different, try something new, and we'd draw in a certain type of people. Nothing wrong with it, but then we'd realize this isn't what God wants us to be. So we're not reaching unchurched people. So we'd do a little switch up, and we'd lose 30 to 40 people. We'd lose about almost 25% of our congregation by making these decisions. And so it was very difficult, especially for my dad, to, whenever I started wanting to get involved and really get into ministry, I was pushing hard, coming from a background of wanting to have a church that I wasn't embarrassed to invite people to. I mean, I'm just being real with you. So that's kind of my mindset, was trying to create this kind of environment. Me and my dad butted heads a whole lot. You can ask my mama. She played peacekeeper. But it ended up working out. It took some time, but it was about 6-7 years ago that we finally realized what kind of church we wanted to be. And that's what CrossPointe is right now. Now, we're not a normal church. We're not a traditional church. And I wanted to go to the book of Acts to talk about this. Now, in the book of Acts, what's going on basically, there is technically the first church business meeting, if you want to be real about it. First church business meeting. And what was going on is this was taking place about 20 years after the resurrection of Christ. Now, the whole debate amongst these people was, okay, for a person to become a Christian, what has to take place? And there was a group that said, okay, to become a Christian, you first have to become a Jew, and then you can become a Christian, because their whole mindset was Jesus was a Jew first, and he unleashed Christianity onto the world, and that's the way you're supposed to do it. And so you had another group that said, no, Judaism was just what Jesus used to come into the world, and it kind of birthed a new religion, so you can come straight to Christ without becoming a Jew. So they came to a conclusion, and James, the brother of Jesus, we've talked about James, the brother of Jesus, how if you can convince your brother that you're the Son of God, you can convince anybody, and you must really be the Son of God. But James, this is what he said in Acts 15 and 19. He says, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." What is he saying right there? He is saying that we should make it as easy as possible for people to turn to God. As easy as we possibly can. And once upon a time, you were an unchurched person. How many of you, at some point in your life, you were an unchurched person? Just raise your hand for me. Okay? Once upon a time, you were unchurched. And you didn't understand the church lingo. You didn't understand the church culture. You didn't get how that specific church you went to did things. Didn't make a whole lot of sense to you. But you're here at this church now, and you've kind of got accustomed to what we do. And like I said, it's different kind of style than a lot of churches in town. Actually, we're probably there. I don't think there's a church in this county that's like us. There's a lot of people that do contemporary things, but not quite as progressive as what we do sometimes. But until this is the thing, until you have seen this church through the eyes and heard us through the ears of a seeker, starter, or returner, you haven't seen us and you haven't heard us. Think about that for a second. Until you have seen this church through the eyes and heard us through the ears of a seeker, starter, or returner, you haven't really seen us, you haven't really heard us. What does that mean? Let's say you're after somebody to come to church. You stay after them because you're proud of our church. This is an easy church to invite people to. Okay, you invite that person, you stay after them. It's been 2 or 3 months, and maybe it's Easter coming up, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to go to church. They ain't never been to church before, but you stayed after them. So they come to church. They tell you they're going to come to the second service. You come to the first service to volunteer. As you pull up, you begin to notice things you've never noticed before because you're thinking in your mind what they're going to see when they come here. When you pull into the parking lot, or as you're approaching the parking lot, you see Ronnie Luck or some other crazy person standing out front dancing around. And you're like, what in the world are they going to think when they first get here? Somebody's out front dancing in front of this church? What are they thinking? Pull into the parking lot, they got cones lined up. Somebody wants you to stop, and they want you to flash your headlights and say if you're a visitor, and they want to escort you somewhere, escort you in the building. You start thinking and you start seeing how we do things. That's when you start to notice. That's when it becomes more apparent, and you start looking at people through the lens of an unchurched person. Now, this is the key right here. The key to us remaining a church that is effective for the unchurched people is for you to be willing to invite people. Now, I'm about to say something, and you're going to find this really hard to believe that I would say this. If you know me personally, you know I really can't stand this kind of thing, but this is the truth, and it's this. Inviters critique and complain correctly. What? Talking about critiques and complaints. Inviters critique and complain correctly. What in the world are you talking about? There's a correct way to complain? A church person critiques and complains about all the wrong things. An inviter critiques and complains about all the right things. Because this is the way it goes. Like I said, you have somebody that comes to the church that you've been after for a long time that's never been to church. And you start noticing all these things. And there's been plenty of times, and I'll be 100% honest with you. It's my job to kind of oversee the environment for Sunday morning. I create schedules and videos and all that kind of stuff. And so if there's complaints about Sunday morning service, they come to me. And I'll tell you how I filter those complaints. Is this person a church person, or are they an inviter? Oh, it got quiet. Are they a person that's engaged in this ministry? Are they a person that's invested in this ministry? Are they actively inviting people to this church? Because this is what I know. If a person that I know is involved and they are inviting people to this church and they have visitors coming all the time, they're noticing things that maybe I don't see, because I'm technically still a church person. I'm used to this. Most everybody in here is used to this. At some point, you became used to this. So I've had people come up to me and say, Micah, and they always do it the right way. They're not mean about it. If somebody comes up to me the wrong way, I know they're a church person. But somebody comes up to me with the right kind of spirit, and they're like, one of my friends, I invited them to church, and as they were coming in the building, something happened, and I just want to let you know about it. Maybe we could think about doing this. That's noted. We address that issue because they know they're going to keep inviting people, and they want those people to come back because they're invested in this church. Inviters critique and complain in the right ways. Now, if you're an inviter, you probably never thought about it this way. If you're an inviter and you're engaged in this ministry, you are helping us all the time to improve our strategy. It's kind of like when you have an app, and it says on the app that you can submit feedback kind of thing. An inviter is somebody that can submit feedback to us that we will take to heart, and we will try to implement to see if it's something we can make our church better. Because our goal is to reach people. Our goal is to reach people with the message of the gospel. So being an inviter, you're helping us to mold and shape this church to be even more strategic and to be even more successful at reaching people that you've been trying to get to come to church for a long time. It forces you to look through the lens of an unbeliever. Whenever you got that person coming to church, you want the service, you want it to be short, you want it to be sweet, you want it to be practical, you want it to be helpful. You want the person to leave, if they've never been to a church in their entire life, never stepped in a church, you want them to leave here going, that was different, but that was pretty helpful. I got something out of that. That's what you want, because that will cause them to come back. We're a very friendly church. We have a lot of outgoing people, and we do this by design. We put the friendliest people we can find out front to greet people. Even if a person, I can guarantee you right now, there's more than one person in this room that isn't a Christian. They're not a Christian, but they like the people here. They enjoy being here because we've created an environment that they like being a part of. And they may not be a Christian now, but the influence and all the words that we preach and we say to these people, eventually, we believe that God will penetrate their hearts and change their lives. Amen. It's a whole lot better for a non-Christian to be sitting in this building. They may not still be believing, but they're in here hearing. And if they're hearing, eventually we feel like God's going to touch them and they will turn to Christ. Now, it's kind of like this. Let's create a little scenario. So let's say you're a mechanic. Do we have any mechanics in here? Okay, you're a mechanic, and you work at a garage or a shop, and there's a specific guy that you're real good friends with at work. He's never been to church in his entire life. You stay after him to come to church, and finally one Sunday, he's going to come. So then you start thinking about, like I said earlier, all the things that we do and how's he going to respond to it. So he comes in, and you stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Lights go off. As soon as the countdown's over, bam, music blaring, lights going crazy. He looks at you, and he's like, oh, so this is like a concert. It's like a concert. I got you. And then he's standing there a few minutes. He leans over to you and said, why has everybody got questions? Everybody's got their hands up. They got questions. That lady's got 2 questions. She's jumping up and down. She's really got a question. Really got a question. I watched a video this week, and this was real story, and I thought it was hilarious. It was a couple. They had never been to church in their entire life, never stepped foot in a church, and they went to a big church a big mega church that had really good music and very progressive. It was a lot like us. And they walked in, and they were greeted and all that kind of stuff, and they felt welcome. And they sit down, and the music comes on. They stand up, and the wife looks at the husband. She's telling this about her first church experience, and she says, "Oh, so this is a concert. This is a concert." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then all of a sudden, the words come up on the screen, and the husband goes, "No, I think it's karaoke. I think it's karaoke. It's karaoke. I mean, if you want to be real, that's karaoke. That's karaoke. You've never thought about that. You know why? Because we're church people. If you think about it from the outside, we come in here. If you've never worshiped God and don't know what it's about, you think it's karaoke. Where else do you go, stand shoulder to shoulder with people, sing songs at a screen? That's a concert. Okay? So whenever you start to notice these things through the eyes of an unbeliever, it really makes it a whole lot easier to understand the reasons why we do certain things. We really need you to engage with us. We need you to get involved. We need you to invite people, because it helps us to figure out how we can constantly improve. Now, I'm going to give you 3 things to help you invite people. 3 scenarios, 3 phrases to look for. And I call these the 3 knots. You're in public, you're at work, you overhear something, somebody saying something's going on. You hear any of these phrases, this is a good time to invite somebody to church. First one is, "I'm not in church." You hear somebody say, "I'm not in church," in a casual conversation. Somebody says, "Something's not going well." Something's not going well. You hear that's a good time to invite somebody to church. Next one, I'm just not prepared for. It's a good time to invite somebody to church. So something like this. You're at the grocery store, you're in the line at Food Line, and somebody's talking in front of you really loud. You're not trying to eavesdrop, but you can't help it. And they're talking real loud about something, and somebody says something about church, and they say, "Well, I'm not in church." That's when you step in and you say, "I'm going to give you a phrase to say." "Really? Well, you should come to church, my church, this Sunday." That's all you got to say. Now, don't say, "Come to church with me this Sunday," if you've never met them, because that's weird. Like, I don't know you. I'm not going to go to church with you. You can tell me what church you go to. And it's kind of like this. What I'm proud of in the community is we've developed a reputation, and it's a good one. If you live anywhere in this area, most of the time, if you were to say to somebody, "I go to CrossPointe Church," they're going to ask, "Oh, I know that church. I know somebody that goes to that church." And you have an in. That's one of the things I'm most proud about this church, is we have a good name in the community. People like our church. We're very friendly, have a good reputation. Or you have somebody that says, "There's just something in my life that's not going well." It could be somebody at church. "It's just not going well. Not going well for me at all." That's when you step in. "Really? Well, you should come to church, my church, this Sunday." Or somebody says something like this, "I just wasn't prepared for having a baby. Not prepared for that. I thought it was going to be easy, and I got a baby, and I don't know what to do." "Really? Well, what you do is you should just come to my church this Sunday. Come to my church this Sunday." Do you know what hangs in the balance of your willingness to invite someone? The answer is no, you don't. You don't know what hangs in the balance of that. That's a very hard question to think about. What hangs in the balance of your willingness to invite somebody, or your willingness to not invite somebody? At every major turning point in your life, there has been something that was influenced by an invitation. And you could be that person that could help change the trajectory of somebody's life. You could influence their life to a point that it could change their life and the generations to come of their family. Every person that's been a great man or woman of God, somebody invited them to church. Think about somebody like Billy Graham. He was invited to church. What if they hadn't invited him to church? Can you imagine no Billy Graham? That'd be a weird thing to think about. I'm telling you right now, with the way that this church is, there's somebody everybody in this room can think of somebody that you can invite to church that's not a church person. You can think of somebody that you can invite, and you never know what they're supposed to become for God. That person that you're struggling to think about inviting, they could be another pastor on this staff at some point. Their whole family could be changed because of an invitation that you give them. If you're at CrossPointe and you attend regularly and you were invited by somebody to this church, raise your hand. Okay, you were invited by somebody to this church. Now, I bet if I asked every single one of you, you would say that you're not mad at that person for inviting you. You ain't mad at them. Not at all. Worst thing that could happen is they say no. That's about it. I don't think they're going to fight you over it. They won't, I promise you. Well, you never know. People's crazy, but we're in Fayetteville. But the people in the Dominican have no clue what I'm talking about, but come visit us. But they're not going to be mad at you for inviting them to church. Invite somebody to church. Now, one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this today is because it's summertime. And our church is very young, and people was gone on vacation. We got a little bit of elbow room this morning, but people are young, they got kids, it's summertime, they're going to be on vacation. But there is no reason with the kind of church that this is that we can't be full every Sunday during the summer. Amen. This is not a hard church to invite people to. And I'll be honest with you, other churches that I've been a part of, I didn't want to invite people. I'm just being real about it. This is the only church that I've ever been a part of that it's extremely simple for me to invite somebody to this church. Because I know when I invite them, they're going to get something out of it, especially if they're not a church person. There's somebody that I've been inviting to this church for a while, and they hadn't come yet. I'm hoping that it eventually will pay off. Whenever my mom usually cuts my hair, but sometimes she can't. If she's not available or something, I'll go down here to Great Clips. It's cheap. I like that. But there's a lady that cuts my hair down there, and she asked me one day what I did, and I told her I worked up here at this church. She said, "Oh, I've seen that church. It looks really nice." I asked her if she's ever been to church. Nope, never been to church before. I invited her before Easter. The last time I went, I invited her, and she keeps telling me she's going to come. And every time I go there, I'm going to keep on inviting her. Going to keep on. Because, when somebody starts cutting your hair, I don't know what it is about somebody cutting your hair. It's like you develop a quick bond with them, and you want to talk to them about I don't know what it is about a barber. You start talking to a barber, and you're like BFFs just like that. Somebody cuts your hair, instant bond. But you start talking about things, and she's telling me, where she lived before, where she came from. Start telling me family situation, and, I remember, I didn't say it in those exact words, but I was like, well, you should really come to my church sometime. And she's very nice about it. She keeps saying she's going to come. She even told me one time she was coming that next Sunday. She didn't show up. So if somehow you're watching this, I'm waiting on you. You're going to come eventually. But don't give up on these people. And a lot of people, it takes more than one invitation. I mean, you have to stay hard after people sometime. I mean, don't beat down their door on a Sunday morning before you come here. But, when the opportunities arise, you hear 3 of those knots, to be able to speak into them and say, hey, look for those opportunities. You don't want to be the crazy person that's just going around banging on doors, but you want to look for those opportunities, and God presents them, I promise you. God presents those opportunities to invite people to church.